Welcome. Thank you to everyone that is joining us. Welcome to the parish on the west side of San Antonio. My name is Olivia Travieso. I'm a part of the Executive Steering Committee for today's event. Gracias a todos que nos acompañan en línea y en persona. We'll be live streaming today's event also on the Prosper West Facebook page. So we encourage all those who are watching us to like and share as well to help spread today's message. And to go ahead and get today's press conference started, I would like to introduce the President and CEO of Prosper West. Thank you again.
Thank you, Olivia, and for everything that Olivia and OCI Group have done to help get us here today. My name is Ramiro Gonzales. I am the President and CEO of Prosper West San Antonio, the economic development organization for the west side of San Antonio. Today, we have two great things to announce, and so thank you all for being here with us. Thank you for our distinguished guests to be here with us today, Mayor Nuremberg, Judge Wolff, Congressman Castro, and of course, Secretary Cisneros. Thank you for everyone who's here today. I want to thank our sponsors, without whom our participation in this initiative would not be possible. And so thank you for them for making the investment in the West Side and in our Latino communities. I also want to thank our steering committee, everyone who's worked so tirelessly over the last 6 months to kind of get us to where we're at today and where we're going to go from here on. And so today is very exciting. We have two great announcements. The first is the selection of the west side of San Antonio by the Aspen Institute as part of their Latinos in Society program. That will allow us to start to work together closely with all of our steering committee members, all of the players in the small business area of the west side and the city abroad to start to build the right kind of ecosystem so that it ensures small business success, whether they're a mom and pop that has 1 or 2 employees, or even if they're ready to grow and expand into 25 or 30 employees. That's what we're talking about today. And the selection of the West Side by the Aspen Institute takes us from being just just a local initiative to a national initiative. And that's the exciting part about today. Now, we were selected back in July. And since then, we've put together this fantastic group and have been working tirelessly to put together what these strategies are. And so today we're going to kind of unpack and outline what that strategy is. And so today is that second announcement is the launch of our ESTAR West initiative. ESTAR standing for Entrepreneurs and Small Businesses Thriving Alongside Residents on the West Side. And so we're very grateful for everyone who has put into this. And so today I'm going to outline the strategies here in a little bit. And then we're going to hear from some of our distinguished guests. First, I want to introduce some of our guests from the Aspen Institute who are here with us today. Domenika Lynch, who is the Executive Director of the Aspen Institute Latinos in Society program. And so she's going to be here to speak in just a moment. We also have Dan Porterfield, who is the President and CEO of Aspen with us today. And so with that, I invite Domenika Lynch. Thank you.
Hello. Really, greetings from Washington, D.C. I am so honored to be here. It's quite something to conceive an idea, bring the right leaders together, and then get to that point of implementation and launch, a public launch. So on behalf of the Aspen Institute Latinos and Society Board of Advisors, thank you. Thank you for the ESTAR committee. I love that, to estar, to be seen, to be recognized for your efforts. And I'm grateful for Ramiro's leadership. He's the steward of this committee. And I also want to recognize Olivia Travieso and the entire organizers of the press conference. She's done a fantastic job. San Antonio is such a special place, not only for all of you that live here, but for many Latinos across the country, because you have birthed some of the most incredible organizations that are national beacons of light, and leaders as well. And I am so proud to recognize 2 leaders that I've had the chance to get to know on a personal level and work with. I want to begin by recognizing my former boss, Congressman Joaquin Castro, who when I was at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute really led the way to ensure ensure that more Latinos would come to Washington, D.C. to envision themselves as leaders in our nation's capital. And certainly I also want to recognize Henry Cisneros. It was because of his son, John Paul Cisneros, when he was at USC that we first connected. And the opportunity to work with him at the University of Southern California to promote scholarship, to bring more Latinos to USC, to also provide scholarships for them. But more importantly, I want to thank Henry, because it was Henry that I called in April, and I had this vision for this program of bringing Latino majority cities together, create this marketplace. Very intentional, not saying minority majority, but just calling it what it is, Latino majority cities. Leaders, cross-sector leaders who know the know-how, who have the cultural pride, and have the responsibility to ensuring that their communities are seen and are recognized for what they do so well and what the possibility for those residents are with the right capital, the right investments, the right connections. And so Henry said immediately, because I called him to just triage anything that I wasn't thinking about, and his first thing, and I have to thank him because he didn't criticize the initiative, he said, how about San Antonio? And I thought that was brilliant of him. And not only did he volunteer that San Antonio would be a great place, he also volunteered to connect me to someone like Ramiro. And Ramiro, I just really want to recognize your efforts. I don't know where he's standing. Where are you? He's doing an incredible job. He is available for this, and not only for San Antonio, but for the other cities as well. So why are we doing this work at the Aspen Institute? Well, the thing is that the urgency of now calls for something more. To be in Washington, D.C. in a think tank and to assume that we would know what's best for you in San Antonio on the West Side, that would be presumptuous, that would be wrong. And if there's anything wrong about America is by, maybe taking too much into consideration what we know in Washington inside the Beltway and not really what we need to know about the realities of Americans in the front lines. And so what we propose is that because of COVID, we know that the inequities that have existed are worsened, and that if we don't really have a play to interject now, that our communities will be further set back behind. And so this initiative was really about bringing together these 6 Latino majority cities that would have an anchor partner, as Westside Prosper is, and would have a data partner, as UTSA is here, and a strong committee who would identify a priority. And this priority would be the one that they would carry through the support of the Aspen Institute and ensure that they can implement change. What's different about this moment in time is also the investments, trillions of dollars coming down to communities across the country. And the cities that are not connected, are not networked, will be the cities left behind. And I am sure you agree with me that we cannot let that happen here in San Antonio. We just cannot. And so I am proud to be part of an effort that has a leader like the person that I'm going to introduce you to, who has been recognizing that Latinos in the United States, we are an important cohort, but more than that, we are the future of America. That the Latino economic agenda is the American agenda. I want to read you some stats. We are really privileged to work with McKinsey, and they're our knowledge partner. We recently launched the Economic States of Latinos in America. I encourage you to look it up. And here's something that they say, that although the promising that Latinos are the promise of America, it really is a fragile Latino economy. If Latinos were to be equal to non-Latino-owned businesses, we would be able to contribute more than $2.3 trillion to our American economy. Ensuring the economic success of American Latinos is ensuring the future success of the American economy. And that's what the City Learning and Action Lab does. And we are confident that with the leadership that we have in San Antonio, that we are going to drive change, transformative change. This is time for big bets. And I want to now introduce someone that I admire, respect, and after Congressman Castro is my favorite boss, someone that is really walking alongside me. I've been at the Institute only 1 year, And when I was recruited for this job, I said to Dan Porterfield that it was important for him to embrace this agenda of Latinos and society. And he got it. And he has a soft spot for Latinos, has done a lot in his career as a president of a university, and is someone now that is transforming the Aspen Institute to more than a think tank, but a think and do tank. So now it's my honor and privilege to introduce our president and CEO of the Aspen Institute, Dan Porterfield.
What a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Domenika, for that introduction and for all of your work leading the Aspen Institute's Latinos in Society program. And thank you to Olivia and Ramiro, Mayor Nirenberg, Congressman Castro, Secretary Cisneros, for all you've done to make this event and this partnership possible. I also would like to recognize San Antonio College, which our organization, the Aspen Institute, selected in 2021 to receive the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence, which is the nation's signature recognition for highest achievement among more than 1,000 community colleges nationwide. It's a tremendous accomplishment. It speaks to the quality and richness of San Antonio as a community, and of course, all the people that make the community. Well, my organization, the Aspen Institute, is a pretty large people and community serving nonprofit organization. We work to drive change toward a free, just, and equitable society. And many of our programs partner with and serve communities like San Antonio in areas ranging from education to healthcare, family empowerment to interreligious dialogue, and of course, economic development, which is why we are here today. Now, as Domenika said in her beautiful opening remarks, Latino-owned businesses and communities like Westside San Antonio are dynamic, growing, powerful, very resilient sectors of the U.S. economy and of our culture as a whole. Communities such as Westside San Antonio are critical to our collective future, and I would argue to our democracy as a whole. The work that brings us together demonstrates so much vision and a set of, I think, very humanistic values reflective of our multicultural, multi-ethnic country, at its very finest. There's just the extraordinary vitality, culture, history, diversity of San Antonio as one of Texas's and one of the country's, very greatest assets. And I come to the Aspen Institute for many years working in education and working directly with Latino students and in Latino communities all around the country. First at Georgetown University, and then when I served as president at Franklin and Marshall College, which is a smaller college in Pennsylvania, very strong school that developed a talent strategy through which we tripled our population of Latino students pretty quickly and really strengthened the school for all students in doing so. A number of those young people came from Texas, including the extraordinary Jeanette Berlanga, who graduated from KIPP University Prep in San Antonio and now is a law student in town at St. Mary's University, a great person. Well, in years of working with students and families through education, I saw again and again how motivated students make an entire school better. And of course, the students from San Antonio, with all the brilliant diversity of talent and background and identity, brought to the schools where I worked values like education, family, opportunity, work, and culture to the schools where I worked. And in working with students, many from Texas over all these years, I really witnessed something very profound and relevant for what we're here to talk about today, which is that the foundation of all these great young people on which they built their hope and their pride and their drive was their parents' participation in the economy as owners or employees in small businesses. This sector is a springboard to equity, to opportunity, to financial stability, to advancement, to hope for families and for communities. An absolute springboard. And that's why we at the Aspen Institute are so committed to flourishing. The power for our society, for people of all ages and communities of all types, when we invest in Latino-owned businesses to help them form and to help them grow, has circles of impact for good that touch everyone. Now, the recruitment of Domenika, who you just have met, was really a major priority for our organization. And we worked hard to get her, and she is doing amazing work. And under her leadership, our Latinos in Society program has responded with vision and purpose to the particular opportunities and challenges facing Latino businesses communities all across the country. Really what she's doing is she's driving a Latino economic agenda forward. And it's very important then that we created the City Learning and Action Lab to help focus on the recovery and growth of Latino-owned businesses in communities like San Antonio, why we're so excited to be partnering with all of you. And San Antonio, and in particular, the West Side, needs to be a part of national endeavors like this one, because it represents the future of the country. It's, as I understand it, the oldest Hispanic urban neighborhood in Texas and 94% Latino, the birthplace of numerous Hispanic equity movements. The community has put together a really robust plan for comprehensive small business growth that builds on all these different existing assets and partners. And I love that idea that it's asset-based. And together with a steering committee of more than 15 community partners, chaired by Secretary Cisneros, who has an incredible reputation in Washington, D.C., where I work, a very long shadow. You've been working since August to develop a suite of strategies that will really drive impact for Latino-owned businesses and set a standard for the country. It's really exciting work because it will make a difference in the community, but it does have national implications and reach. And in addition to San Antonio, we're partnering with San Bernardino, El Paso, Phoenix, Miami, and Chicago. I'm really proud and glad that you're a part of this. I look forward to coming to visit in person to be able to see the progress and learn more about the community and be able to tell others what's being done in San Antonio. We're so proud to partner you. I wish you the very best. Thank you so much for allowing me to visit with you today. And now I'd like to turn things over once again to Ramiro Gonzales to continue the program.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for being here. And Domenika, thank you for your comments as well and for being with us today. So, this effort, as Dan mentioned, started back in July, August. We started to really kind of get together and figure out, okay, what does this really mean? What is this real opportunity? And so there were really two tasks before us right off the bat. One is to get everyone together who is in the business of small business as it relates to our community, our businesses around the community, around the city. So who is offering services, who's trying to be in this work, and bringing them together so that we can have a really deep conversation. And then the second thing is to then rethink what we think we know. And that meant stepping outside of our organization and what we do into what needs to actually exist for our small businesses to be successful. Not limited to whatever we do for our particular organization or our own programs, but what does this ecosystem need? Where are the gaps? Where are the barriers? Why do our small businesses start something and then start one of these programs and then we check in with them a year later and there hasn't been much progress? What was that barrier? And so that's a lot of the work that has occurred over the past 6 months since we were selected for this fantastic program. And so, again, I want to thank our steering committee members because that was not a light lift by any means. And that doesn't mean there was always a lot of agreement either. It was accepting that it's going to be a little messy. And that's what has actually added the tremendous value to what we have today. And so I have the distinct pleasure of actually being able to present these 6 strategies that make up the ESTAR West initiative today on behalf of that steering committee. And so the first of which is outreach, and it really is the cornerstone of it. These first 3 strategies are really all focused on direct business assistance to our small businesses. And again, that first one is outreach, because it doesn't matter how good our programs are if nobody knows about them, or if or the business who needs it most doesn't know about it. And so how do we create a robust outreach system so that we reach the least reachable businesses? That's the little restaurant owner who maybe only has 2 or 3 employees and can't look up long enough to go and see what programs are out there and spend all that time. Those are the kinds we're looking to reach. And so outreach is a cornerstone of kind of where we're going. The second is what we are calling a roundtable accelerator. And that kind of turns the current kind of paradigm on its head. Right now, the way that it works is if you're a small business and you're looking for some kind of assistance, chances are you're going to kind of tell your story 5 or 7 times to different programs and different organizations, trying to find that right fit. And so this is meant to kind of turn that around. Instead, we're going to surround each business with those organizations, put them in a room together to identify and work with them intensely over 4 months, a cohort of businesses, about 10 or 15 at a time, to put them in a room with these organizations to collectively determine how do we solve problems for this particular business in their very specific situation and develop a plan of growth with them. What that does is that one produces very strong businesses who are able to invest that time rather than having to shop 15 different places. It's a much better use of their time. So we end up with stronger businesses, but the other great thing is we also end up with a stronger ecosystem as a result, because now I'm sitting in the room and I can hear how LiftFund would address that problem for that business. I can hear how UTSA has all these programs I had no idea existed. And so it's an organic ecosystem building measure that will start to add value to our businesses and start to give them, allow them to maximize their time towards their own development. And then the final is a strategy centered around digital inclusion. Our businesses are many times just not digitally connected. As a result, they miss out on opportunity, they miss out on access, they're not able to attract as much of a customer base as they otherwise could and operate more efficiently and profitably. So part of this effort would also be to equip and train 750 of our Latino small businesses over 3 years to be digitally connected and to be able to compete in this new digital economy. The last 3 strategies are supportive in many ways, in that they focus on the business environment, because our businesses are only as successful as the place that they're in. And so the 4th strategy is a focus on a corridor reinvestment strategy, to look at the real estate of the Westside and ask, how do we make this work for our small businesses? How do we make the real estate on the Westside work for our families and businesses on the Westside? And so this effort would be focused on raising capital to start to purchase and activate properties on the Westside, and that would help to reduce blight, to reduce slum, to reduce vacancy, and start to bring activity back that can be leveraged and then redirected and channeled back into our neighborhoods and businesses. In our fifth strategy, sorry, I lost my place. Our 5th strategy is a marketing campaign to start to transform the perceptions of the Westside. Even as you drive around the Westside now, and it's a beautiful day today, so you can see how great things are and how beautiful things can be. But many people who aren't already on the Westside don't know that. They have a different perception of what the Westside is or how it's painted as, but they need to know about the character, the culture, the history, the fantastic assets and institutions that we have here on the Westside. And so this marketing campaign would be focused on inviting the rest of our San Antonio community to come and take part, to come and participate in the Westside economy and support our small businesses. And the last strategy is an acknowledgement that any kind of change in a low-income community has the potential to exert pressure on vulnerable families and businesses on the Westside. And so the last strategy is specifically focused on a series of what we call neighborhood preservation strategies. These could be community land trusts. These could be anti-displacement mitigation fund. This could be accessory dwelling unit program. Those kinds of strategies that balance the equation so that at the same time we're attracting growth to the Westside and attracting opportunity that can ultimately support our small businesses and support hiring, we're also balancing that with strategies to support and protect the most vulnerable. And all of that is intended for the ultimate outcome of making sure that the businesses and the residents that we have on the Westside here today are still with us 10 years from now, are still with us 15 years from now, and that they're actually not just surviving, but they're thriving because of the work that all of these members here are doing here today. And so I'm personally excited about the opportunity to move forward. This is just the beginning, right? The work has just started. These are a set of strategies, but the next step is, what is it going to cost to actually deliver this kind of system that our small businesses, our Latino small businesses need? And then how do we identify the resources and start to move that forward? I'm excited about that opportunity, and this is unlike any other in that, as I said earlier, this is no longer just a local initiative. As you heard from Dan, as you heard from Domenika, we have a partner in Aspen to take this to a national level and not only identify what are some other best practices that we could be using from other cities, but how are they funding it? How are they getting creative about leveraging the assets in their state, in their cities, to be able to bring this to fruition? So I'm incredibly excited, and I thank you all so much for being part of this exciting opportunity. Next, I'm going to introduce Janie Barrera, who really needs no introduction, of LiftFund, who is a pillar in our community, in the Westside and in the city, and helps support small businesses and also serves in our executive committee. Janie.
Thank you, Ramiro, very much. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be part of this organization, this cohort, that we're trying to deepen our collective support for small businesses and entrepreneurs on the West Side. Today, January the 14th, 1994, 28 years ago, I was hired to start LiftFund. And some folks behind me were then, Judge Wolff was the mayor of San Antonio. Henry was on the advisory committee that helped bring me to this position that I have today. And then also, our congressman, I believe, was at the university, starting out at Stanford. So as you can see, there's a lot that has been done since then, but there's so much more to do. So the vision then in 1994 was to create a fund that would be able to support and give access to capital to small businesses that cannot get capital from the banks now. It was also to support access to education, financial education, because what's the good of having dollars if you don't know how to use it? So fast forward a little bit to 2014. We purposely built our beautiful $8 million headquarter campus just a few blocks from here on Martin Street. We wanted to be immersed in this community and contribute to the economic development of the West Side. From the offices here in San Antonio, we now serve 15 states across our country. And annually we disperse over $30 million in dollars to small businesses, all under the average loan size being $25,000. Last year here in San Antonio alone, we dispersed over $8 million to small businesses, and the average loan size here in San Antonio is around $23,000. We see daily the challenges, struggles, and tough decisions small business owners make every day to run their businesses and to build a better future for their families. We know that the ongoing pandemic has had a severe and detrimental impact on the small business community, and we also know that communities of color have been the most affected. Here on the West Side, our residents had to face increased challenges, such as lack of access to resources and information. Like Ramiro says, these barriers are digital, the part of the digital divide. At the same time, the West Side community is rich in so many ways. Our residents are hardworking, very entrepreneurial, and dedicated to their community. Like the father and son Barrio Bauristas that's located on Culebra Street. They wanted to be here today but couldn't make it. LiftFund helped them be able to get that place going, and that's a great example of how a family neighborhood business can continue. They actually partnered with us with the City of San Antonio's grant program to LiftFund, where we were able to offer them an interest rate of 0% for their capital that they needed. More of that to come as we move forward here on the West Side. We are also lucky here on the West Side to have the support of private and public institutions, like Our Lady of the Lake University, who you see on the front of the booklet there. We're trying to start an entrepreneurship program, and Georgina Schmall would be here today as well, but we were limited on space. So we also have programs with UTSA, as you all know. So we are all invested in the success of this neighborhood. I'm grateful to the Aspen Institute, Latinos and Societies program. Thank you, Domenika, for being here today, and Dan. I'm excited about working together so that we can shine a bright light and collectively act on the many opportunities available to help the Westside succeed. So with that, I would love to introduce our mayor, Ron Nuremberg. Actually, he doesn't need an introduction because we all know of his hard work and dedication, especially in these last years of COVID, of where we've had to be able to look into everybody's eyes and say, okay, what do you need? How can we help? And how can we keep our economy and our city growing? And our mayor has been in the forefront, along with our judge, but I don't get to introduce him, somebody else will. But help me welcome our mayor, Ron Nuremberg.
Well, good afternoon. I'm excited to be here. This is a very special moment in time, and my only regret is that we are in COVID and this room couldn't be an auditorium full of people. But it is great to be here for a positive news story. San Antonio's selection as one of 6 Latino majority cities to participate in the Aspen Institute City Learning and Action Lab is great news indeed. The program will boast and nurture the small business environment here on the San Antonio's West Side, which is the heart of San Antonio. And as you know, small business and small business growth is the key to job growth overall in our economy. The small business sector provides jobs for about 34% of the local workforce, and this program will help San Antonio small businesses develop strategies to create more jobs. The innovative strategies emerging from the ESTAR West program will help bring equity and balance to the small business environment in historically marginalized areas that were also hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. In San Antonio and elsewhere, the pandemic turned the spotlight on longstanding inequities and cracks in our economic foundation that have reverberated throughout the decades that we've been here. We need to make it easier for small businesses to be successful. And so this effort represents a systems-based approach to small business development and breaking down barriers and silos. It's no secret, and Janie spoke to this, that small businesses in particular were hard hit by the pandemic, and that impact is still felt, particularly minority businesses and here on the West Side. The number of small businesses in San Antonio dropped by about 35% during the pandemic, and small business revenues even more than that, closer to 45 to 50% according to our city's Economic Development Department. And the historic inequities still remain. Hispanics account for more than 60% of our county's population, yet they own only 24% of the businesses. But they have been resilient, and ESTAR West is a moment in time and a time that's come and will help implement the next phase of recovery and coming back stronger in the post-pandemic era. The city is indeed proud to support this ecosystem initiative. I can tell you that as soon as I heard the news from Henry, we wanted to jump up and down and celebrate right then and there. We hope to see it implemented in other areas of our city as well. The best practices that are coming out of even the steering committee conversations are already things that we can be implementing. And San Antonio, it should be said, is a special part of this roster. San Antonio is not just a Texas city. It's a national city, and it has led in Latino advancement. And it's also a city who I think can best exhibit the kind of collaboration and the needs for us to overcome the historic challenges that cities like ours have faced. In many cases, or in many ways, San Antonio is the lens through which America will see its economic comeback. Through the works of LULAC, NALCAB, COPS Metro, and the list goes on, San Antonio has also been at the heart of the Chicano movement. And so through this initiative, San Antonio will continue to lead the way in Latino advancement. So on behalf of the City of San Antonio, I want to express our gratitude to the Aspen Institute for including San Antonio in this critical program, and I especially want to thank Dan Porterfield and Domenika Lynch for their inclusion and for their presence here as well. Of course, it goes without saying, but Henry Cisneros' leadership in this effort merits recognition. His role marks another in a long list of his works that help our city and help our country. So to everyone involved, I look forward to seeing the fruits of your labor, as I know the rest of our population does as well. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to introduce the next speaker, but I will, because I think I should. And that is someone who I think this entire city has and will see the fruits of his labor for a very long, long time. And that's someone who's dedicated his entire life to service of our community and who casts a very long shadow, but who I can say personally has been an incredible person to be partnered with through a very tough time for our community. And that is our County Judge, Nelson Wolff. So, Nelson, come on up.
I think I've spent more time with Mayor Nirenberg than I have my wife in the last 2 years. We've been together almost every night. And I want to thank Henry Cisneros, our great friend, and one that really transformed this city when he was mayor and really made job creation one of the really major steps of what cities and counties ought to be about in helping. It seems like yesterday, but it actually wasn't. 1962, we started selling roofing off the street corners of Southwest Military Drive, my two brothers and myself, and then my dad came along and we started a little small business, and eventually it grew pretty good. And we opened a store over here on West Commerce. And there were really just two things we learned. Number one, you got to work hard and sacrifice. If you're not willing to do that, don't start a business. And second, you need credit. And so one of the things we did, we built a great business on small and minority businesses. We were the only place in town that gave them credit without checking their credit. We believed in character rather than some form that would start credit. And I can tell you, over the years, we never really had anyone stiff us. We just say, how long is it going to take to do your job? Okay, you pay us then. And it works. So I know credit's important. And so that's why we at the Commissioner's Court, when this pandemic began, understood that the first thing we needed to do was step out and help small businesses. Out of the funds that we had some control over, we put up over $20 million in grants to small businesses. And Janie Barrera was our hero in that. We did fund through Maestro and through SAGE, but the bulk of the funds went through the LiftFund that she managed and did a great job in providing that financial support to businesses. At the county, we started, actually the year after I got there, a major small business conference, smaller minority business conference, where we have 4,000 or 5,000 businesses to come down, along with contractors that might hire them or businesses that might hire them to do work, and then all the training that we try to do through that. So we've been very, very attuned to the need of small businesses. And of course, like the city, we have a minority contracting firm. For example, Henry played a major role when we worked to bring Toyota here. Today, you see 23 companies that are suppliers to Toyota. The vast majority of them are Hispanic-owned. And Henry sort of got out and put those teams together and made it work. And so that was a huge step forward, I think, for small businesses. And really, they're really not very small anymore. Some of them have over 1,000 employees working for them to do. Now, when you talk geographically, let me just say a couple things crossed my mind. I always get it. Is it 35 or 37? 35's over here. 35's over here. We think of that as the dividing line, but really historically the dividing line was San Pedro Creek. Anything on the other side of San Pedro Creek got developed, and on the other side it did not. So you always had this void in downtown, near downtown area where the Westside never really prospered. So the Commissioner's Court decided to put in almost $200 million into restoring San Pedro Creek today. And so what do we have there now? As we're moving along, hundreds of apartments have already been built along at the federal courthouse, UTSA, with this tremendous building that they're building right now that'll bring 6,500 students downtown. And we're providing land right across the street from them, from the creek on the other side, for them to build another business school, innovation school. So that's going to be a huge generator on this near west part of downtown. And that's a big, big step. We want to thank UTSA for that. But when you jump on the other side of the freeway, another issue. Of course, I grew up on the south side. I thought it would never, never, ever come back in my lifetime. But what do you see today? It is prospering on the south side of San Antonio. I was doubtful that I was going to see anything happen on the east side of San Antonio. But it's beginning to happen right now. But we're not really getting our teeth in to get going on the west side of San Antonio. When we say the near west side, I will say, far west side is booming, but the near west side. Henry comes over here and makes several investments in the new building that he's built, trying to foster small businesses and trying to get it going. So it's really a step at a time. You got to inspire someone to do it. They've got to sacrifice, and they've got to sacrifice tremendously if they want to do it. And then you got to be able to provide them some credit and some understanding how to get there. We started Bibliotech in 2014, which is all digital public library, and one of the first places we put them. In fact, we named it after you. We named it right over here on Zarzamora. That's over there. Now we're building another one right here in the San Antonio Independent School District, where Fox Tech is, where Cass School is, where there's two other specialty schools, to reach these children early on and get them to understand technology as well as reading. So we believe very much that you've got to breach that digital divide, and we've been doing best we can for the last several years. So I'm anxious to see the outcome of what's going to happen today and as we move forward, but it is a step at a time. It's one business at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And I know we can be successful here, and we can bring some prosperity to the west side of San Antonio and really make a huge change. So thank you for including me.
Go ahead. Oh, sure.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see everybody, and great to be here with all of you. Good to be with Ron, with the mayor, with Judge Wolff, and of course with Henry, who is Mr. Westside, along with Mary Alice, Mrs. Westside of San Antonio. And thank you to Ramiro at Prosper West, and of course Domenika, Lynch, and Dan over at the Aspen Institute Latino for all of their incredible work and for this wonderful partnership. I'm Joaquin, Castro, and I'm very honored to represent a big part of the west side of San Antonio and the northwest side, a big part of the south side in the 20th Congressional District. But this is a very special place for me because this is where 100 years ago, when my grandmother came to San Antonio as a young orphan, she settled on the west side of San Antonio by Little Flower Church. And so for 100 years, my family has been in and around the west side. I went to school at Afoya and Carvajal, so I spent a lot of time here and still represent this wonderful place. And there is an incredible amount of potential in the people here. If you go inside the homes and you talk to the people, you see that they're often people who are hardworking, who are determined, who are persistent, who are willing to sacrifice, as Nelson said, people who have big dreams. But those big dreams, unfortunately, over the years, haven't always been matched by the same opportunity. So this, to me, represents, this coalition and this partnership, a real opportunity for what I hope will be many people who own small businesses now, but also folks who dream of owning their own small business. And the mayor gave us a very stark statistic. The fact that the city is about 64% Latino. The county is 60% Latino, but Latinos only own 24% of the businesses. And I want you to think about what that means for a community for a second. There are a lot of things that we're proud of in San Antonio. We're proud of our Spurs, we're proud of our culture, of the food, a lot of great things about our wonderful city. But I know that one thing that we're not proud of is the fact that again and again, San Antonio ranks as one of the most economically segregated cities in the United States of America. And you think about why that is. That statistic, I would argue, that the mayor pointed out, is one of the reasons. And so I would ask as we go about our work, and Janie and LiftFund have done incredible work over the years. Her work represents, I think, and we've seen it with other organizations that have grown and been birthed in San Antonio, the fact that they've made real changes in politics and civil rights, in business, not just here, but throughout the country. But I would ask that in all of our work, that we focus not only in growing the small businesses that exist, but also in growing beyond the numbers that exist. So for example, if you were to drive around downtown San Antonio, or even if you went up to Austin or Dallas or Houston or other major cities around the country, if you look at who's working on the roofs in 102-degree weather in July in San Antonio, if you look at who's working on the road construction crews in July along I-35 or somewhere else where construction's being done, you look at who those workers are, often those workers are Latino Americans. And so we should look at the ratio of owners to workers in a city and figure out how we get more of those workers to become small business owners and hopefully one day medium and large business owners. In other words, how we serve not only the existing businesses, but how we aggressively turn more workers into owners. And I would argue a few things. First, that that's the only way that we're going to increase that statistic of Latinos only being 24% of the business owners. But it's also the only way we're going to close that economic disparity in our city and in our county. And also, you know, this is a city of incredible talent and potential and of big dreams. San Antonio is a national and an international city. But we also have our own ambitions. We compare ourselves to places like New York or Silicon Valley or Los Angeles or somewhere else. There is no way we're going to fully realize our economic ambitions, our ambitions for who we are as a place, unless we are successful at efforts like this. Too many people in our city right now are simply sidelined economically. They're simply sidelined. And unless we can harness that potential, unless we can engage them in business ownership, in entrepreneurship, and also in work, only then, I believe, will we truly be able to live up to the grand ambitions that we have as a city. So thank you, Domenika. Domenika, I know, she was a driving force at CHCI. I know her work ethic, her dedication, so I'm glad that she's the main partner with the Aspen Institute in this, and Ramiro, all of his work at the city before, and the political leadership in the city that I know cares about these things. So I look forward to the years ahead in this partnership. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing somebody I said is Mr. Westside of San Antonio, and really in many ways, along with Nelson, Mr. San Antonio in our politics over the past generations. Somebody who has given so much of himself, of his career, of his money, of his effort, his time, everything. That's our former mayor and former HUD secretary and great all-around San Antonian, my friend, Henry Cisneros.
Thank you, Congressman. And I will have you know this morning as we were doing a tour of the West Side, we passed by the school, which I distinguished as saying this is where Julian and Joaquin Castro went to middle school, Tafoya Middle School. So you've got a landmark here on the West Side that you've established by your work. And I don't know how many of you know this or not, but Rosie Castro, the mother of Joaquin and Julian, was the first person I met on the first day of kindergarten at Little Flower School. So we go back a long, long way. Mayor and Judge, Congressman, Domenika, Ramiro, Janie, Olivia, thank you for the OCI group, and to the rest of you, dear friends. I have the privilege of closing out the program, and I will be brief. But I just wanted to speak from the heart for a moment about some kind of recognitions that have fueled my efforts on this, recognitions from over the years. In 1968, I was a student witnessing what was happening in the country, the riots, the assassinations, the burning of the cities, the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, trying to figure how do we right some of the wrongs? What can a person do with their life that puts us on a track toward doing something constructive? And I thought about all of the options. You know, people talk about socialist strategies and government-led strategies and all kinds of things, and concluded from my studies and observations that the American system can work, but it can work if we really make it inclusive. It can work if we think of economics not just growth and stability, which are two well-recognized aspects of economics, but also distribution, also sharing the wealth. And, you know, when you live here on the West Side, grew up over here on Monterrey Street, about 6 blocks from here, live today literally 2 blocks from here. We're at Pinto and Buena Vista. We live at Pinto and Houston. You can't avoid the reality of what poverty is like and what really grinding poverty is like. This morning, Ruben and Domenika and I were sort of touring the West Side, and we went along El Paso Street, and a man who I had met before as a homeless man at a store over here stopped the car to talk about the man he was helping in a wheelchair who, because of drugs, had gotten an infection. It's just, people come to the door of our house. Poverty is a horrible thing, dysfunctional. It's hard for people to understand how serious it is and how sort of the textbook answers don't work. We have to find new ways to make the American system reach, right? So much of my life has been devoted to trying to find that formula, break that code. And I'm convinced that a good part of the way we're going to do this in the American future, because Latinos are a key to the American future. You can't be the fastest growing minority in the country, 60 million people strong today, 100 million by about 2045 out of 400 million people in the country, a quarter of the nation, and be left in poverty and left with the wide gaps in opportunity and the country prosper. It's not possible. The math doesn't work. We have to bring the Latino community into the mix. And one of the strategies by which we will do that is focusing on small business. For a lot of reasons I don't have time to get into today, but it has to do with intergenerational wealth. It has to do with pride of ownership. It has to do with giving people leadership opportunities. It has to do with giving people the time to be involved in civic life. It has to do with creating net worth, something that you own, something you can then sell and send your children to college or start another business. It's the American way. And it requires a celebration of the entrepreneurial spirit that is deep in all of our hearts. And this country fosters it. Entrepreneurship. And Latinos have it in big amounts, healthy doses. We have to figure out a way to help people, help that grow and help that flower. So that's one kind of recognition that I've had over the years. The other is that things don't stay the same. Things change. And that goes very much for this West Side. Once upon a time, this West Side was one of the premier, quote, subdivisions, it was called on the maps, right? One of the premier growth areas of the city. 24th Street was the city limits. The rail track ran to 24th. There was Elmendorf Lake at the bottom, and this was a German community. People who worked in the railroad mostly. But these nice houses that you see here with good bones, those were German families. Then came the changes in the city structure after World War II, and many of those families moved out to the north side when Delview was built, and the areas inside 410, and then later outside 410. But that population emptied out. But there was a saving grace, and that was the returning veterans from World War II, many of whom were Latinos and could not live in those areas. So they decided to make their homes here on the West Side. On the block that I grew up, my dad was a World War II veteran and civil service worker, but so were the 9 other heads of households on the block, both sides of the street, 5 houses, every single one of them. And it's a story in all of these blocks in here. In due course, those people moved out, the younger generation. This is the first generation that had a chance to go to college or get good jobs or move to the north side as segregation broke down in the housing patterns of our city. And who was left was the old people. And they sometimes held on to the houses as long as they could. Some died, spouses died, women left on their own, houses became rentals, and we ended up with now this census tract being the poorest census tract in the city, 78209. Now, we see, as Judge Wolff said, the patterns of dynamic change in other parts of the areas adjacent to the downtown. The four cardinal points on the compass. To the south is Southtown, Ceballos Lofts, Big Tex, Blue Star, the Missions Reach. It's a beautiful thing what's happening on the south side. And the judge has had a lot to do with funding the river extensions and the other things, the mission designation. To the east, the stadium, the Alamo Dome, Sunset Station, now the Velocity and Merchants Ice biomedical area. And then what's happening in Dinglewoody Hill and Government Hill is phenomenal. I never thought I would see those old houses refurbished as is happening right now. To the north is the Mother Lode, Broadway corridor, Grayson Street, the Pearl, the loft space around San Antonio College. If you haven't been lately in those streets around like Euclid and those just north of the downtown, it's unbelievable, those old two-story mansions being redone. But the fourth point on the compass is the west side. And we just haven't been able to get there. As the judge said, once it was San Pedro Creek that divided, set the margins for what was the western part of the downtown and then the west side, red light district, slum area, right? Then it was the tracks, the Missouri Pacific tracks. The jail hasn't helped. It's a massive structure that spawns for us, mostly bail bonds operations, and then Haven for Hope, which was a wonderfully compassionate gesture, but not everybody can get into Haven for Hope, so it serves as a magnet that then pours people into the streets of the neighborhood. We have real, serious questions on top of the indigenous poverty that is real here. So for us to be able to get the West Side going is going to take just an extraordinary effort. And that's why we jumped at the chance when the Aspen Institute stepped forward and said, would you be interested in being part of a national collaborative of 6 cities, sharing ideas with other places, and doing what you can here? I'm grateful to Domenika, who has done an immense job, a wonderful job in everything she's ever done. But now at Aspen, Dan Porterfield told me personally, she is changing the Aspen Institute by taking it to the street, by taking it to real, by taking it to make change in the neighborhoods instead of just convening wealthy people in Aspen, Colorado to talk about the future of the world, right? And Aspen is going to follow her lead in other areas as a result. But when she included San Antonio, we jumped at the opportunity because we need to work at it. Now, that's not to say that the things that have been done in the past year, which are many, going back to model cities in 1968, 69, haven't been important. They have. My friends, this area used to be a matter of life and death. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. Because every spring when the rains came, the Apache Creek and the Alasan Creek flooded and people died. People were out of their homes. The Great Flood of 1921, if you haven't read Char Miller's book, Westside Rising, it will break your heart the way the city thought about the West Side. It was only the poor Mexicans, so if their houses got washed away, not a problem. The death count from 1921 flood was cited to the national press by our local leaders as about less than 100 deaths. But the definition of what was a death was if you found the body. If people disappeared and you never found the body, then they didn't call them dead because they couldn't prove they were dead. There were hundreds who were lost when the creek, just right out here, flooded. That will not happen again. It doesn't happen like it did when I was growing up every year Because, Ricardo, do you remember the floods in the springs? Because the city invested in the Alasan, in the Apache, in Model Cities federal funding with Henry B. Gonzales leading the way. It's a different day, right? So now we have a chance for the change that I described to occur here too. Now is the moment when the West Side can go through these cycles of birth and rebirth and death and life and rebirth. And it's our moment if we do this together. So let's harness that entrepreneurial spirit. Let's harness that goodwill that exists from the efforts of everybody who's worked at this. Congressman Gonzales, cops, Graciela Sanchez and Esperanza, the Prosper West, UTSA, the city, the county, everybody. And let's do something really, really special over here, which I think we can. Again, I apologize for going on so long, but show me a mic and that's a hazard. So I apologize for that, but thank you all for being present. Thank Aspen, thank the city, thank the county, thank Janie, and Ramiro, we're putting a lot of faith on your young shoulders, but I know you can do it. Gracias. Thank you very much.
This concludes our press conference today. Gracias a todos que participaron. Thank you for everyone that joined us. Some of our speakers will be available for interviews. Thank you again to Prosper West, to the Aspen Institute Latinos in Society program, and to the ESTAR West Steering Committee that played such an integral role in getting us here today. We encourage you to take some information about ESTAR West on your way out, and thank you again.